The countdown is on now for the airline industry. Tens of thousands of workers face furloughs on October 1st. And if you remember, September 30th, this is a 30-day month. So that's tomorrow. Anyway, without more federal aid, let's welcome American Airlines CEO Doug Parker, Sarah Nelson, International President of the Association of Flight Attendants, a union representing nearly 50,000 flight attendants at 20 airlines, including thousands of flight attendants who fly under the American Airlines brand. Thanks for joining us. Doug, I'll start with you. Tomorrow's the first. What is going to happen, and what are your plans to deal with it?
Well, absent action sometime today, which we're still highly hopeful can happen. There's a lot still to go on today, but absent any action today, we unfortunately our industry is going to have 100,000 people or more actually who are not employed that would be otherwise, because the Payroll Support Program that was put in place through CARES 1 expires. It was a 6-month program. The airlines were funded to pass through payroll to our people to keep them employed. That goes away. There's enormous bipartisan support to extend the program. We just haven't been able to get a vehicle in order for that to get passed, which is obviously highly unfortunate. But again, still a lot going on today. We are working to make sure that that does happen, and highly hopeful we can get something done today, so we don't. So that none of us have to do that tomorrow.
Well, I'll be with you just momentarily, Sarah. But Doug, let me just ask you, what is the on the other side of this? Even if when we do get back to more normalcy, what do you think the right size actually is for the airline industry out of that 100,000 that you're talking about? There must be some that just aren't economically feasible for the long term, or no?
Well, for the long term, well, no, it's certainly not for today. We're all flying 50% or less of our scheduled airlines because demand is even much lower than that, and revenues are down much more than that. But look, if you get in things like the Great Recession, where demand's down 10, 15%, which certainly could be the case next year or a 2-year basis, that's still the level of demand at which we still fly all of our airplanes. We just make less money. So again, I happen to believe that a 6-month extension is what is needed, and 6 months from now we will be flying close to, or at least getting ready to fly all of our airplanes.
So you really do view it as a bridge at this point. If there's no aid forthcoming, Doug, do you have? I mean, we've made the point in the past that, and it's been made, that airlines have a lot of options in terms of assets that they have and ability to raise money on your own. Do you have plans for that, contingency plan?
We've already done it. This isn't about raising funds for the airline. This is about keeping the infrastructure in place by having having us be paid to pass on to our team members who otherwise we don't have work for, to keep them in place so that as the economy rebounds, we're here to provide that infrastructure. But American, we all have raised, primarily through a lot of debt and through diluting our shareholders, more than sufficient amounts of cash to withstand this. This is about keeping in place so that we can be here to continue to provide service to small communities and to continue to provide employment for our team members so they're not taken off payroll. In the airline business, it's really hard to get, once people like pilots are out of training, to get them back up and trained. Everyone seems to understand that. That's why we have such strong bipartisan support for this. And this is all about keeping that infrastructure in place and keeping those jobs in place.
Yeah, Sarah, it's a tough day, and I know you're probably hearing from a lot of associates just not really sure how to go forward, unless something is forthcoming, as Doug said.
This is a really big day, and we expect action from Congress. And in fact, there are a lot of hopeful signs about that. As Doug said, we have enormous bipartisan support for this program. And the reason that there's bipartisan support for it is because it has shown to be the most successful jobs program of coronavirus relief. Not only does it provide this critical infrastructure for our entire country with continued service to every community, but if we did not have this jobs program, we would have people on the unemployment line. And that is a much more expensive endeavor. People are not paying into the economy. They're not paying their taxes. They're not able to care for themselves. In the middle of a pandemic, we need as many people strong as possible. And what that really means is real people, the people that I represent, someone who said to me yesterday, and we have many of these people who are both parents are airline employees, and they said to me, our 6-year-old child asks us every single day, do we have a job or not? And today they asked, are they going to get a Christmas present? And so these are people who are not going to be able to pay their rent. They're not going to be able to take care of themselves. But this jobs program is an incredibly efficient use of the public's money in the middle of this pandemic, where we are down more than 60%. This is not weatherable, like Doug was talking about, where the airlines did not get a bailout during the Great Recession. We're able to weather that. We're able to weather that downturn. That's not what this is. And this is a bridge to a day when we can recover.
Hey, Doug and Sarah,
Yeah.
I'm probably a broken record on this issue. I think you both know that I desperately want to help the employees of the airlines, very much so, perhaps maybe more than I have espoused before. I think, but as I always ask, the question is, can I help the employees of the airlines, and can I help the airlines as a taxpayer stay in business, but also not necessarily help the shareholders of the airlines? Or if I'm going to help the shareholders of the airlines, can the taxpayer effectively become one? Shouldn't the shareholder be diluted? Can you speak to that issue, Doug? Because I don't think we've talked about this on the air directly together.
Certainly, Andrew, I will. Again, as opposed to things like, as you're well aware, the banking crisis and the bailout of the banks, that's not what this is. This program, again, started by union leaders like Sarah and others, because it's just that, a jobs program for infrastructure, as opposed to a bailout for airlines or the industry. This program is built to keep infrastructure in place. To do that, the airlines need to be compelled to do uneconomic things, to do things like to keep more people employed than we have jobs for right now. If we keep them employed now so that they don't get out of training, so they're here to help the economy rebound, to serve markets that there isn't sufficient demand to be served today, but to continue to serve markets so that we can help the economy rebound. That's what this is. The way our shareholders pay for that is by even greater losses than we would have otherwise. We're being funded for that. So we are doing things that and our shareholders therefore are paying for them. That wouldn't be done otherwise to keep the infrastructure in place. And that's how our shareholders, and again, on top of that, if there is upside, there are warrants here on top of this, if in case our shareholders should happen to accrue more value than we happen to believe is required at this point. But that's how our shareholders pay. They pay through greater losses because we are going to keep in place flights that are uneconomic. We're going to keep in place employees that we don't have workforce, but they are here when we come out of it. That's dramatic. I know it's different policy than people are used to. I think it's great policy. It's worked incredibly well, as Sarah has said. It's so far. That's why everyone believes it should stay in place. But that's how we're compensated. The taxpayer, and that's how our shareholders are paying. The taxpayers are compensated for this.
And Doug, Andrew, this is not a bailout. So this is not a bailout. It's a jobs program. So this is very different. This is not like the airlines made bad decisions and they're in a bad place because now they need to be bailed out so the rest of the economy doesn't collapse. This is a jobs program, and I'm a taxpayer too. Every airline employee is a taxpayer too. So we are directly paying back into the system, and that is the return to the public. The return to the public is keeping us in our jobs and not having to care for us in some other way because we won't be able to care for ourselves because there's nowhere else to go. So this has been the most successful jobs program, and I just want to remind your viewers what it is. This can only go to the pay and benefits of employees. It requires no involuntary furloughs, so it keeps people in their jobs and connected to their health care. And it also requires a cap on executive compensation, no stock buybacks or dividends, and they have to pay back in a loan 30% of that program as well that's also backed by warrants. So all of this is not a bailout. It is an infrastructure and jobs program, and it is the best use of the public's money with 100% return to the public and to the taxpayers, of which we are one of them.
Hey, Doug, can I just ask you, you said that you think 6 months from now, demand is going to be back in a very similar fashion to what we saw before the pandemic. If you ask most airline analysts, they will tell you that they don't see the pre-pandemic demand returning for years at this point, potentially. What makes you think 6 months from now that you will be able to be at those demand levels and be employing all these people?
Becky, I'm sorry. If I said that, I didn't mean to. What I tried to communicate was we don't expect demand to be all the way back, but we have seen gradual improvement in demand. Our revenues were down 85% in the second quarter, 75% in the third quarter. We expect them to be down 65% in the fourth quarter. That's enormous drops in demand, of course. There's gradual improvement, and the point I was trying to make is we don't need that to get back to 100%, to be 100% of the employees. In times like the Great Recession, where we saw demand drop 10, 15%. That still is a level of demand that has us continue to fly all of our airplanes. It's just these really severe drops of 50, 60% that have us not flying. So what I believe is a 6-month extension that gets us to where we're headed into the summer period, where hopefully the virus has dissipated, where things like furlough, where things like quarantines and and people staying at home and work from home have lessened, and that where demand is now closer to 80% of what it used to be, that we would need all of our team members, and not to mention through things like early outs and other things, we're all dramatically smaller already. It's just a matter of getting the employees that are still part of the airline industry that we don't have work for today employed. I think 6 months from now we'll be in a really good position.
All right.
And Becky.
Go ahead, Sarah. Final word.
Well, we're going to bridge to another place where people are 6 months closer to being able to qualify for Medicare and retirement, and you will have a normal progression of people who can have other options as other industries open up, and they can go to other jobs too. Right now, we have no options, so we need this bridge, and we need Congress to act today. And both Doug and I would agree that can absolutely happen today. Every sign is that this will happen today, and we will make sure that these airline employees stay in their jobs.
Hey, Doug, real quick, would you be willing to accept money from the government if there was a more dear arrangement, if you will, for shareholders? Because I'll tell you, by the way, just looking at some of the simple math, and this is coming by email to me as we're doing this, $25 billion, we talked about this being a payroll support program, $25 billion divided by 35,000 furloughs coming in October, that would be $714,000 per job and would cover just 6 months of continued employment. So when people are doing the math, they're starting to think to themselves, A, is it all really just going to the employees? That's one part of it. And B, would you accept an arrangement where the taxpayer received more? And wouldn't that be appropriate?
Andrew, the math's wrong. You can't just look at the furlough numbers, because we have all done things like putting people on leaves, that people who are not being paid, putting them on leaves just so they can keep their payroll, just so they can keep their benefits. They have chosen to do that instead of taking furlough payments. The number is hundreds of thousands of people. We at American Airlines alone have 40,000 people who are that are still employed by American Airlines who aren't going to be working on October 1st. 19,000 furloughed, but another 13,000 on these leave programs. Other airlines have done things like just cut everyone's pay. Everyone's pay will be cut by 20% on October 1st, which has the exact same impact as furloughing 20% of your people. So those numbers just aren't. You simply can't look entirely to the furlough. And so the result is, yes, we are incurring much larger costs than just the cost of the furlough number. And we're serving markets that wouldn't be served otherwise, and we're agreeing to do it for 6 months. So things could get much worse, for example, but our commitment remains in place. So no, the government's being fully compensated for what they're providing to the airlines, and our shareholders are incurring the costs. And again, no one is asking. This is a straight extension of what was done before, whereby the government calculated upon it. The Treasury Department calculated that 70% of this was straight paid back to them. The other 30% we pay in a loan, and to the extent there's upside, there's 10% of the loan in warrants on top of that. I think the taxpayers are being willing to compensate.
Keeps people in their health care during a pandemic. Thanks, guys. We appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug Parker. Appreciate it.